Mr. Marion, welcome to the committee.
Thank you. I've been waiting 10 years, so
You're very patient.
don't want to wait any longer.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Okay. Thank you, members of the commission. My name is, for those of you who are particularly public members, might not be familiar with my organization. We're Common Cause Rhode Island. We're a 51-year-old organization, nationwide organization. I run the Rhode Island office. On Tuesday, I sent you all a letter, although I didn't have email addresses for the public members, so I apologize that you might not have gotten it. But you should have it before you today because I gave it to the clerk. And it was signed by my organization and 22 other organizations asking that you develop a transparent, accessible, and fair process for what you're going to do over the next several months. We recognize that this is incredibly important work, and it's going to last for the next decade. And that is why so many of the groups that signed the letter were actually involved in the census outreach that provided the data for what you're about to do. I'm not going to review every point in the letter. I'm just going to hit a couple of highlights that I want to emphasize. Really, a fair process begins with an accessible one. One of the things that you heard from Mr. Brace is that state's Latino population continues to grow. That's why we think you should attempt to provide Spanish language interpretation of your meetings. One of the interesting things that's come out of the pandemic is that many public bodies, or some public bodies, are able to do that. Some school committees have been using simultaneous interpretation. We think you should try to do that. We're also cognizant that many people want to be in the room today, but because of various reasons, don't feel comfortable being in public. So we're hoping that not only you're broadcasting this, but you'll be able to take remote testimony. I know you're going to go around the state, as Mr. Brace said, and that's great. But there may be people who don't want to attend in person yet still want to testify. And we've seen from the legislature that you have the ability to do that. We ask that when you do release data or release maps and put them on the website, that you don't just release the PDFs, the maps themselves, but you release the shapefiles that go along with the maps so that advocates and citizens can look at the underlying data that were used to draw the maps. We realize you have a somewhat compressed time frame because the census data were delayed, but we still think you have enough time to do this right. As we say in the letter, we'd like this to be transparent, and toward that, Mr. Brace started to talk about some of the criteria that your enabling statute lays out, including looking at communities of interest. We'd like to see some public debate about those criteria among the commission. It's your job to prioritize what you're paying attention to. Those can be in competition sometimes. You may want to respect a community of interest, but it doesn't lead to the most compact district, for instance. And we think that should be a public debate. And then when you do release maps, you release not just the map itself in the shapefile, but also the narrative explaining why you made the choices that you did. Finally, I wanted to say something about prison gerrymandering. We heard a little bit, and we had a question from Senator Metz about this. This is something that many states have been doing away with this practice. And I want to point out that many state legislatures have done away with this practice. But just 2 weeks ago, the commission in Pennsylvania decided to reallocate prisoners away from the correctional facilities there. So I disagree with Mr. Brace. I don't think it's too late to do. They are 2,000 people who we think deserve to be represented in their home communities. So I would urge you to look into fixing that problem yourselves. So I, again, will leave you the entire letter to look at and ask that you do so and take into consideration our requests. And I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Marion. Are there any questions for Mr. Marion from any members of the committee at this time? Senator Metz.
No, not so much a question, but after 30 years up here, my wife's got me cleaning up the office and at the house, so I've got boxes of stuff, and I just happened to run across some redistricting information that I had from 2005. And one of the concerns then was about the criterion, and the minority community, the black and brown community at that time, wanted to make sure, because I think it came from Phil West and Common Cause, that there wasn't so many criterion that we lost sight of drawing districts in respect to minority voting strength. And for me, my whole purpose here, because I was in the House for 14 years, I got out, and then we had to sue the state. I sued the state of Rhode Island, and then my friends talked me into coming back into the political arena. So I'm very familiar with that process, and we had the civil rights under the law from Washington, D.C., and Morris and Forrester from San Francisco that came to our aid. And then the General Assembly, the Senate, in their wisdom, decided to settle out of court, and that's how they created Senate District 6. So for me, the whole thing is not diluting minority strength. So I agree with a lot of the things that you're doing as far as the transparency. As long as it doesn't dilute the representation from the black and brown community, I certainly will, I certainly will support that. But anything that goes against that, I won't, because we need our community has been left out for so many decades, and we've done a lot to contribute to the state of Rhode Island, going back to the first Black Regiment during the Revolutionary War. So we've made our contributions and our participation, and we want to make sure that our rights are not diluted. But I want to thank you for that. But that's where I'm coming from. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairs.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions, Mr. Marion? Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Marion.